Rockaways Productions presents The Casey Waters Show, episode 485, A Dry Planet, Part 2. Hello, I'm your host, Casey Waters, and today I have Ambrosia with me. I don't know if you could see her, but I'm petting her in her face and on her nose and whatnot. And she's purring. So you might hear a little purring in the background from time to time. So today I will continue with A Dry Planet. Here I look at the effects of climate change, how overall our world might be a drier place in the future, and what we could do to mitigate the situation. Later on in the program, it's united and strong. Here, I look at the state of the United States and how our democracy might be in danger and what we could do to protect it. Today's show will feature background footage from Bear Wallow Mountain. Bear Wallow Mountain is located next to Girton, North Carolina. To get there from Asheville, North Carolina, take Highway 74A east to Girton. When you get to Girton, you take a right on Bear Wallow Mountain Road. And the road will start off as paved, but then it will turn to dirt. And when it crests the ridge, it will become paved again. Right then, when the road becomes paved again, pull off and park. Bear Wallow Mountain Trail is off to the left. On the top of the mountain is a cow pasture and some cell phone and radio towers. So, now let's continue with A Dry Planet. Less water could have a devastating impact. And it's not just in the western United States, it's all over the world, this less water. And so many wells are running dry. Many rivers are turning into just a trickle. Lakes and ponds are disappearing, and so on. And so there's more, with this less water, it's going to create more problems in terms of water shortages. This could have a serious impact on our life, as our food choices might become more limited, and what remains is probably going to be more expensive. And so there's more wildfires. That's right. Sure, the drier it is, the more things are going to burn. The planet is on fire. Sure it is, with large portions of Canadian forest burning earlier this year in the summer of 2023. And of course, there's large wildfires in the western United States and all over the world. More of these wildfires. Putting out more smoke, which has more carbon in it, which is going to trap heat and make global warming worse, which might make the drying worse. And we're going to have to fight these fires. There might not be enough personnel to deal with all the fires. And these wildfires, of course, well, they could impact all sorts of things, from food sources to areas of recreation to our homes. All of it could just go up in smoke in a giant wildfire. But what else is going on? More flooding. Well, hold on here. Didn't I just say everything's getting drier? So now I'm saying there's more flooding. Gee, this doesn't make sense. Hold on here. Maybe it does. So I just have to explain it to you in a little more detail. So, it all starts, well, with how much moisture the air can hold. Well, the air actually could hold more moisture at higher temperatures. And also, with higher temperatures, the water evaporates faster from the soil, from rivers, from trees, from everything. So all this water is evaporating into the air. More water because the evaporation rate is higher. So water enters the atmosphere more quickly. And more water can evaporate during the day when the temperature is higher, assuming there's the same amount of water to evaporate. So, we have this higher evaporation rate. We're getting more moisture into the air. Shouldn't that mean more rain? Well, hold on here. Also, with the warmer temperature, the air has a higher capacity to hold water. So even though more water's entering the air can also hold more water. So what happens? Well, if you think about it in a little more detail, it's not just the surface that's warming. The warmth is transferred upward, layer by layer, into upper layers of the atmosphere too. At least areas where weather occurs. The troposphere, the bottom 10 miles of the atmosphere. This is where the weather occurs. And so there might be more moisture in this air, but as I said, the air could hold more moisture. So what happens is when moisture rises, well, the air gets colder the higher up you go, as a general rule. Not always. Sometimes you could have an inversion, where the air gets warmer as you go up. This is more common in the winter, especially in areas where the air is still and you're in a low area, such as the valley. Well, the cold air can stay on the bottom of the valley with warmer air above. But normally, it's the opposite. Normally, the warmer air is on the bottom and cooler air above. And so the more warm air rises because it's lighter, rising into the cooler air. And it's taking the moisture that evaporated from the ground and lakes and streams with it. Well, as the air rises, it gets cooler. And cooler air could hold less water. Well, eventually, the air is going to become saturated. What I mean by that is the air is going to rise up high enough and cool down enough where the air can't hold any more moisture than it already has. And so the extra moisture is squeezed out in the form of clouds. And eventually these clouds could obviously produce rain. But with the air being warmer at higher levels, well, the air could hold more moisture there. And so we might have clouds forming, but they might not be quite cool enough to produce rain. In other words, when the air cools, due to rising or due to other situations, well, whatever moisture in it, as the air cools, it might condense and form a cloud. Well, if the air cools further, well, less moisture could be held in that cloud, and the moisture comes out in the form of rain, or snow, or sleet, or whatever precipitation. Well, so what's happening is we get these clouds forming, especially in the summertime, these cumulus clouds, which could eventually grow into cumulonimbus, that is, thunderstorms. Well, these clouds rise up higher and higher, and eventually the top of them is ice. It's so cold. The air's so cold. Instead of water droplets, it's ice crystals. And these ice crystals, well, actually attract any water drops around them, any water droplets, and they grow even bigger. And eventually they fall as big snowflakes. And then they encounter the warmer air and melt and turn into rain. Of course, if there's a strong updraft, the snow, as it changes to rain, could be pulled back up into the upper areas of the cloud and freeze again, and then fall again as a ball of ice. And then the more water could condense around the ice ball in the lower regions of the cloud, and if the updraft is sufficiently strong, it can be carried up again and get another layer of ice on it. And then it will fall again, get more water, rise up again, get more of ice, and eventually it's too heavy for the updraft to carry it up, and it falls down as a hailstone. The stronger the updraft, the larger the hailstone. And so global warming is creating the potential for that, for more energized air. Warmer air has more energy, and it could rise faster, assuming the air around it's the same temperature. So this warmer air rising faster might set up a situation where you could get a hailstorm. But other than that, well, if the updraft isn't real strong, well, it will create maybe a cumulus cloud instead of a thunderstorm. And so this cumulus cloud won't produce any rain. And so that's what often happens, it seems, during the summer. We get large cumulus clouds, but they're not quite tall enough to turn into a thunderstorm. These cumulus clouds could be miles tall. A thunderstorm is probably about 5 miles tall. Sure, maybe even taller. However, if the cloud is just a mile or two high, it probably won't produce any rain. And so that's what often happens during the summer. These cumulus clouds get big, but not big enough to produce rain. And so the moisture is carried off. Well, where does it go to? Well, what happens is, with more of the air having a higher capacity to hold moisture, and we having more evaporation, so we're getting more moisture into the air. But since it has a higher capacity to hold moisture, it might not rain right away. It has to get into an area where it's cooler, where the area is cooler above the warmer air below, where the cool air might sink and cool the warmer air and cause the moisture to condense out of the clouds and produce rain. Well, this only happens in certain areas. So a large portion of the world, well, is just dry. It's not getting the rain. But when the rain finally does fall, it's often concentrated and falls heavily in a small area, or relatively small area, perhaps a few hundred square miles wide, but still this area is getting flooded, where most of the other areas for thousands and thousands of square miles are dry. And so instead of having widespread light rain, you have concentrated heavy rain over a smaller area. And so this smaller area is going to get flooded, but the rest of the area that doesn't get rain is going to dry out and perhaps even have a drought. When the planet was cooler, rain as a general rule was more lighter and more evenly distributed over the planet. And so thus probably less areas had drought and less areas had floods. But now, with the warmer planet, with the atmosphere being more energized and being able to hold more moisture, well, that creates a situation where you can have more flooding, but also a situation where you're going to have more drought because the moisture is going to be carried a long way before it finally gets in a situation where it could rain. So we have a situation where we have more flooding in a concentrated area and larger areas getting drier, deserts expanding, and, well, more and more water shortages. So what can we do? Well, obviously, I guess we could try to create more water sources, maybe by drilling deeper wells or creating lakes and things like that. But perhaps a different approach, one you don't hear about much, might be soil mitigation. Here, you try to change the soil itself to have it so it could hold more moisture, hold moisture longer, and hold more nutrients. And so what do? Well, you would have to create a situation. Well, first of all, you would want to lean more towards organic agriculture, obviously, and using less fertilizer. And using more organic fertilizer, such as manure, compost, and so on. Then, on the lower edges of your fields, you build them up. You build up the soil to make it higher. In a sense, building a little wall, almost like a little dam on the lower edge. Of course, if you get heavy rain, obviously this might create more flooding. But perhaps in that situation, you could dig a few holes in the wall, allowing the water to escape. However, in most situations, when it's drier, whatever rain you do get, you want to stay in the field. So hence, you kind of build this little dam on the lower edge to keep more moisture in. Also, using more organic material, compost, and the like in your soil will also help keep the moisture. What you might have to do, of course, is plant cover crops, perhaps even for several years, to really build up the soil. And so you would plant a crop, and then when it's harvested, instead of taking the material away, it would just be allowed to lay there and rot on the soil, and thus breaking down and becoming part of the soil. As I said, if you do this a few years in a row with the right kind of crops that put nitrogen into the soil, this could help build up the soil as far as make it more robust to retain moisture, but also make the soil more robust in terms of nutrients. So, certain crops like legumes and I think alfalfa and others do help put nitrogen into the soil. You would have to do more research on this. So, this is a serious problem. The problem of the planet becoming drier. And so thus I am talking about it. We need to take more steps in soil mitigation, in urban planning for water shortages, and in other ways. So this way, we could all deal with a dry planet. Now, it is time for United and Strong. Here, we look at how our democracy in the United States may be in danger in late 2023 and what we might be able to do to save it. Meanwhile, we have finches in the background chirping away. Even though they're covered, they don't care. They want to make noise anyway. We're just going to have to deal with it. So, it always seems that I'm in a hurry, that I don't have enough time to do what I want to do. Well, we're kind of in the same boat as a country. We might be running out of time. We might not have enough time to save our democracy. Can we do it? Well, that might depend on us being united and strong. And gee, I do mean it. United, coming together, learning from each other, people of diverse viewpoints, conservatives learning from liberals, liberals learning from conservatives. Sure, we need to share our perspectives and what we know. And together we can educate each other and find the right solution. How do we know it's the right solution? Well, the right solution will include, well, everybody. It will have provisions to protect everybody and have provisions to make sure everyone's voice is heard, especially at the voting booth. So that means getting rid of gerrymandered districts. For one, here in North Carolina, well, we're famous for our gerrymandered districts. They're all leaning Republicans. So, because of that, well, North Carolina might send more Republicans to the U.S. House of Representatives. Because that's the way our districts are made. they're cut in order to favor Republicans. Sure. So, well, we just have to fight this and undo it and have fair election maps that reflect, well, the demographics of the state. So, in other words, if the state's 50% Republican and 50% Democrat, and we have 10 congressional districts, well, then in theory, we should send about 5 Democrats and 5 Republicans to Congress. However, North Carolina, with their gerrymandered maps, it might be more like we're sending 3 Republicans, and it's more like we're sending 7 Republicans and 3 Democrats, because the maps favor Republicans, even though we're probably close to 50-50 as far as the makeup of the population. 50% Democrats, 50% Republicans. Well, let's move along. It's a lot more than gerrymandered districts. No, let's dive in. Let's get into the thick of it. Let's confront the demagogue. Oh, yes. We need to call the demagogue for what he is. We need to define the word demagogue to our children. We need to make sure it is in their vocabulary list. Check it, please. This is important. For they're out there, the demagogues, and their rhetoric, sure, stirring up fear and hate, where the fear and hate might not be justified. They often exaggerate the dangers of certain groups of people, like immigrants. Well, I guess blacks will be next.
Casey Waters Show. Producer, Casey Waters. Graphic editing, Judson Laird. Please note our new email address, caseywaters2@caseywaters.com.